Hello, church family. Welcome to today's Sunday school lesson. As you can tell, I am not at home. I am actually in Eureka Springs, Arkansas right now, and it's actually about 11:30 on a Friday night. But I'm going to record our lesson so that we can have that ready for Sunday morning, and I'm not having to rush to do it after we get home from Eureka Springs tomorrow evening. So anyway, we're in session 8 entitled Together, and our key idea this week is believers find greater effectiveness when partnering with other believers. And we're in Acts chapter 18, verses 1 through 11, and then 18 through 21. We're going to start by asking the question, why are some people reluctant to work with others? And how has cooperation with others helped you accomplish a task more effectively? For me, I have trouble dictating, or dictating is the wrong word. I have trouble expressing myself in a way that is understandable for a lot of people. I can't make sense of my own brain sometimes, and so a lot of times for me it's easier for me to just do the thing myself because I don't have to explain what I'm trying to do for somebody, not because I don't think that they can understand it, but because I don't really have the words to put together. So for instance, a lot of times Grace will ask me if I need help cooking in the kitchen, and I tell her no, mostly because I don't really know what I'm going to be doing with any level of concreteness. I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 2 minutes, so I don't know what to tell her or ask her to do for me. So I don't know if it's chop veggies or things like that, because I just kind of, when I cook, I just kind of do everything all at once, and I don't have really a plan unless I'm baking something, because then you have to follow an order. But with most things, cooking is very freeform for me, and so that's one way that I have a hard time collaborating sometimes. I have a hard time collaborating because my own thoughts are not in order, and it's not I want to do it all myself. It's I feel like I have to do it all myself because I can't get my own thoughts lined out and organized well. So anyway, we're going to be seeing Paul leave Athens and go into Corinth. And there he's going to come into contact with a person named Aquilla and his wife Priscilla. And they're going to join with them. He's going to join with them, and they're going to work together to share the gospel, and they're going to try to reach the people of Corinth with the gospel. And he's going to see some opposition, and he's going to have a hard time doing so, and he's really going to need to lean on Aquilla and Priscilla. So let's begin reading there in verse 1. After this, after his time in Athens, he left Athens and went to Corinth, where he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Paul came to them, and since they were of the same occupation, tent makers by trade, he stayed with them and worked. So he left Athens, he's going to Corinth, and then he found this Jew named Aquila. This is the husband of Priscilla, and they had actually been a part of the expulsion of the Jews by Claudius from Rome, and they met Paul there in Corinth and became ministry partners for him. And the reason that Paul was drawn to them was because they were teachers of the law, and they were tent makers, and tent making was a profession taken up by, sorry, I'm shaking this table, by teachers of the law, so that they wouldn't have to teach for money, that they would actually have a trade that brought value to folks. So Paul had been a tent maker for a number of years by this point. But anyway, he joined with them, and then he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade both Jews and Greeks. When Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul devoted himself to preaching the word and testified to the Jews that Jesus is the Messiah. When they resisted and blasphemed, he shook out his clothes and told them, "Your blood is on your own heads. I am innocent. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles." So he left there and went to the house of a man named Titius Justus, however you want to pronounce it, a worshiper of God, whose house was next door to the synagogue. Crispus, the leader of the synagogue, believed in the Lord along with his whole household. Many of the Corinthians, when they heard, believed and were baptized. The Lord said to Paul in a night vision, don't be afraid, but keep on speaking and don't be silent, for I am with you, and no one will lay a hand on you to hurt you, because I have many people in this city." He stayed there a year and a half, teaching the word of God among them. After staying for some time, Paul said farewell to the brothers and sisters and sailed away to Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila. He shaved his head at Sintry, where I don't know how to pronounce that, because of a vow he had taken. When he reached Ephesus, he left them there, but he himself entered the synagogue and debated with the Jews. When they asked for him to stay a little longer, he declined, but he said farewell and added, "I'll come back to you again if God wills." And then he set sail from Ephesus. So we're actually seeing Paul in Corinth and Ephesus. So let's look at our first section. This is build relationships. This is so key for believers because relationships are what fuel our drive to share the gospel. It's hard to share the gospel if you are not making relationships with other believers where they feel like they can partner with you and share the gospel with you. If you're always doing things on your own, you're going to have a very hard time finding places to stay, finding churches to preach at. And Paul was wanting to make connections with other Jews who are suffering a similar fate as him, and they worked together for the gospel. And Priscilla and Aquila, they believed, and they in Jesus, and they became ministry partners. So what was the advantage of Paul joining Aquila and Priscilla? Well, now they had a way to, they had 3 people working and making tents. They were able to work and do that. But also he had somebody to relate to. And that's always encouraging when you have someone to relate to. And he also had his companions, of course, but now he had people who were like him. Luke was a Greek. And while Silas was a Jew, or at least was from the area, I think he was quite a bit younger than Paul, and so these people might have been around the same age, and so it was just easier for him to relate to Priscilla and Aquila because of who they were and what they did. And so how can partnering with other believers make us more effective in our ministry? Well, we all have different talents. I am, as I said earlier, I'm not the most organized thinker, and yet a lot of what I do as senior adult minister, being in a hotel room in Eureka Springs, requires organization and planning and things like that. And so I'm so thankful for people like Lori Ellington, who have helped me become a better planner, number one, but also have taken on some of the planning responsibilities for these kinds of trips, planning an itinerary, typing it all out for me, and organizing in a way that is pleasing to the eye. And they love it. Lori specifically loves doing it. She's happy to do it. And I've told her several times, if you would like me to do this, I can do this. And she says, no, I am happy to type these things out and help you in this way, and to get things organized, especially organizing folks to get baked goodies for the buses and things like that. And I'm so appreciative of things like that, because while I am the head of the ministry because of my position, it would be a much harder job. It would be and the job would be done much more poorly if I didn't have a team or partners in that ministry also helping along. A lot of what I do is thanks to members of Emory Baptist Church. Same thing with the choir and the praise team and Sunday morning worship. A lot of what I do is a collaborative effort with other believers, and I just happen to be the guy in charge. And that's both a blessing and a curse, because if things go well, I give the praise. I get the praise, and obviously I don't want the praise, but so I make sure I tell everyone else good job and I give the glory to the Lord. But also, if things go poorly, I'm the one who is also scrutinized. So if there's a mistake or if something goes wrong technically, I'm the one who is bearing the brunt of that responsibility and having to fix it. And so there's always a positive note to collaboration, because you get to share in ministry with one another. The difficulty comes when you're the leader of those certain things, but collaboration is always good when collaboration itself is good. So our second section is share the gospel, and this is verses 5 through 11. Let's read that together. So when Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul devoted himself. So here we see that Paul actually traveled alone. He left Athens and went to Corinth without Silas and Timothy. He didn't have his group whenever he met Priscilla and Aquilla. So Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, and Paul devoted himself to preaching the word and testified to the Jews that Jesus is the Messiah. When they resisted and blasphemed, saying that Jesus was not the Messiah and slandering the gospel, and not just Paul, but also the message that he was preaching, Paul got mad, and he said, he shook out his clothes and told them, "Your blood is on your own heads." This is the same act as whenever they dusted, when Paul and Barnabas dusted their feet from the dust of, I'm trying to remember the city, and it was several weeks ago, and I don't remember now. But anyway, they were preaching in a city, and they had to leave, and they dusted the dust of the road off their shoes, and walked another way. And basically saying, we're not even going to take your dust from your streets with us. Well, so he just shook out all of his clothes. He said, I am done with you Jews. I am done with you here in Corinth. And from now on, I'm going to preach to the Gentiles. So he left there and went to the house of a man named Titius Justus, a worshiper of God, whose house was next door to the synagogue. So this was a Greek man, but he was a worshiper of the one true God, and he lived next door to the house of worship, the synagogue. Crispus, the leader of the synagogue, believed in the Lord Jesus, along with his whole household. Many of the Corinthians, when they heard, believed and were baptized. The Lord said to Paul in a night vision, "Don't be afraid, but keep on speaking, and don't be silent. For I am with you, and no one will lay a hand on you to hurt you, because I have many people in the city." The Lord had already revealed the gospel to many people in the city, and that's encouraging to Paul that he doesn't have to fear for his life. And then finally, verse 11, he stayed there 1.5 years teaching the word of God among them. So Paul set up a long-term residence and long-term position there in the synagogue, teaching and preaching and beginning a church with the help of Priscilla and Aquilla, and also Titius Justus and Crispus. So how would Silas and Timothy's presence have encouraged Paul? Well, these are friends. These are longtime friends. And so these are people that he's already partnered with. So he's got new partners and old partners all working together for a common goal. It's all good stuff. And that's true for us too. When we have people that we're familiar with and friends with, it's much easier to work with them compared to working with somebody that we've never met before or brand new in a relationship with. So how do God's protection and presence encourage our kingdom work? Well, there in verse 9, when we have people who will protect us and go with us and go before us, it makes it much easier to be more courageous and be more faithful to step out in faith and to step out of our comfort zone when we know that we won't suffer bodily harm. And so God was assuring Paul of this, to not be silent, to not be scared of the Jews, but instead to continue to be faithful to preach the gospel loudly. And then finally, our third section is follow God's lead, and this is verses 18 through 21. After staying for some time, Paul said farewell to the brothers and sisters and sailed away to Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila. He shaved his head at Centuriae, I don't know how to pronounce that, because of a vow he had taken. That vow he took was probably a Nazirite vow, because he shaved his head. We don't know what happened, but it's probably a Nazirite vow, and they would cut their hair after fulfilling the vow. So maybe by staying there, he fulfilled a vow that he made to the Lord. We don't know. Anyway, verse 19, when they had reached Ephesus, he left them there, but he himself entered the synagogue and debated with the Jews. When they asked for him to stay a longer time, he declined, but he said farewell and added, "I'll come back to you again if God wills." And then he set sail from Ephesus. So, how was Paul's reception at the Ephesus synagogue different from where he had experienced in other places? And why was he in such a hurry to get back to Syria? Well, there in Ephesus, they wanted him to stay and debate and listen to him longer, and he declined and then sailed on to Syria. I think he was just tired, burned out, maybe. He had experienced a lot of rejection. We don't really know why he left so soon, but he had to go back to Syria, back home. But we don't know why. Just probably burnout. Ministers get burned out. People in ministry get burned out. Paul was probably feeling a little bit of burnout here, which is why he didn't stay in Ephesus. And then finally, our last question: how can believers support other believers in ministry? By praying for them, by coming alongside and taking care of minor details of things for them. All of that is good, but I would say primarily encouragement and prayer go such a long way. Telling someone that they're doing a good job, even when they don't feel like they are. Telling someone that you appreciate their ministry, even when they feel, especially when they feel unappreciated. Letting someone know that you're praying for them because you can tell that they're having a hard time. All of these things are really good and have been good for me. There have been Sunday mornings where I thought that I did a poor job as a music minister and as a choir director, and people have come up to me afterward and said, "Man, brother Chris, I was so touched by the songs you picked this morning and how they related to the message and what Brother Richard was preaching on." And I'm sitting here thinking about every time I missed a chord on the guitar, and every time I heard the choir sing wrong notes. If they sang a wrong note, I'm not saying that they always do, but they can, and because we're all human. Or anytime I sing a wrong note, I'm sitting there thinking and analyzing all these things in my own head, and then somebody will come up and go, "Man, that was a great music service this morning," and that's super encouraging to me because I've learned not to take somebody's compliment and turn it around and make it a negative, like, "Oh, well, you didn't hear this," or, "Oh, well, they must have not noticed this." I try not to do that because it's very disingenuous to the person giving the comment and very unfair to them. So if they are giving a good compliment, I try to always be gracious and say, "Thank you. I really appreciate it," because I really, really do. Anyway, thank you for being with me this evening. I know it's different than normal, but next week we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming on Saturdays. So this video is going to go live a little bit early, and it'll be on the website at normal time tomorrow. But anyway, I look forward to worshiping with you on Sunday morning very soon. Bye-bye.